Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion, essentially entitled, Why the World Wants Zambia's Copper. Why does the world want Zambia's copper? Today we have a stellar panel of experts here that will essentially consider, as has been indicated, why copper is the new oil. That will be answered. We will also explore the geopolitics around that, and who's controlling these supply chains. In line with the theme today, I think we've all heard that as general counsels or government counsels, we're more than just legal experts, so we're strategic partners in whatever environment we're in. So this conversation is more than just the legal frameworks. It's really the intersection between the economics, the geopolitics, and the sustainability conversations, and seeing how all of these work together in shaping our future. One of our panelists was the Minister of Mines, but unfortunately, due to competing national interests, national duties, he couldn't attend this morning and sends his apologies. But as has been indicated, we do have a stellar panel. And this is Mr. Lombe Mbalashi, as has been introduced. He was the former general counsel for ZCCM, which is Zambia's mining and energy investment holding company. Mr. Sokwani Chilembo is the CEO of Chamber of Mines, in the Zambia Chamber of Mines here, and he's an engineer. And Mr. Banda is a lawyer, managing partner of AMW Co, the sponsors of this panel discussion. And thankfully, he doubles as the board chairperson for the Energy Regulation Board, because we will also discuss the energy and how it interplays here. And he also sits on the board of the Lusaka International Arbitration Center, because dispute resolution will always arise when we're talking about mining. So I will get straight into it. If we could go to the next slide. I know this is wishful thinking, but I was just thinking about some of the headlines that I'm thinking would basically take shape in the next 5 years between now and 2030. And for me, these are the headlines that I see. Copper crisis, global EV production stalled as supply shortages hits critical levels. Or Zambia emerges as copper superpower, reaches 3 million ton ahead of schedule, and so on and so forth. And for me, I don't think these are speculative headlines. So I'm hoping that the panelists here today will sort of help us understand why these headlines actually mean something for at least all of us here. So I'll start with the first question. Why is copper considered the new oil? And I think the most appropriate person to answer that is Mr. Chilembo, as a mining expert.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nakasamba. The factors driving the upswing in the price of copper are really mostly technological. The shift to the new energy storage technologies that are being applied in mobility, that's in vehicles, in electricity transmission, that's grid stabilization applications, and also grid storage in situations like the one prevailing in Zambia today, where we are all using basically inverters and the like to tide us over through load shedding. But there is another support to this demand, which is growing pretty fast. I think it's 25% year on year in the EV space. But you also have a support in that, for example, in the case of Europe, the mobility is no longer their priority as regards copper and its associated critical minerals. It's actually defense. So you have a dual long-term fundamental support to the price increase. And there is another underlying factor, which is that, the copper is getting deeper in the earth and of lower concentration. So it's getting harder to mine and find. These are things we knew going back 20 odd years, but I think when you overlay this new technological demand, that's what is pushing a lot of analysts to, forecast 15,000 ton per annum prices, at which point, yes, copper does become the new oil. Yeah, so that's the basic outlay of where this is coming from.
Great. Mr. Mbalashi, did you have anything to add to this? Your take of why copper is the new oil?
Well, yes, thank you. As Mr. Chilembo has said, copper now plays a very big part in where the world is being driven. And I'm sure everyone has heard the story of critical minerals and EVs and whatnot.
Please clarify, what are EVs?
Oh, electric vehicles, sorry. Okay. Sorry. So, yes, so basically the shift is now that everyone is going to what they're calling green climate, green energy sources, green manufacturing. All of these things are centered on copper, cobalt, which is an offshoot of copper itself. And so basically the trend that is going there is because there's mass industrialization. You need it in the batteries themselves, in the vehicles, copper cables, and the highest off-taker currently and the producer is China. And it has been for the last 20 odd years. And so now the shift towards why copper is the new oil is the destination, especially in Africa, is apart from DRC, would be Zambia. And that's why even the West now is trying to come back into that space. And that is what is going to drive up the interest in copper.
Okay, great. So you've actually, you've read my mind, because my next question was going to be basically on the global market. Who's controlling this global supply chains? Could you kindly explain some of these geopolitical shifts that are happening and how that essentially affects the copper production, supply, and pricing?
So yes, so like I just said, China has been the largest off-taker, and they produce a lot, not only for themselves, but for the rest of the world. The driver in the geopolitics is that normally it was West versus East. I used the word versus loosely, but take an example of Zambia. Like I said, for the past 20 years, I think you would find the Chinese have about 3-4 mines in Zambia. The West, not so much. But you had your Glencore, you had your Vedanta. But suddenly, last year, you have a new entrant. The Middle East is now playing in this space, which means there's a shift, because the Middle East, the West themselves, and the East all have different priorities, or have different manner of interests. They all serve their interest, and the copper is what is in the center of this. Saudi Arabia, for instance, is very big on data libraries, right? These are driven again by copper. And so there's not many countries that produce as much copper as is required, especially in Africa. Like I said, number 1, DRC, number 2 is Zambia. And that's why even locally you will see there have been deliberate policies to try and push up the production of copper.
Great. Okay, so we've set the scene. We know the demand for copper. We understand the geopolitical situation. I'm going to come down to Zambia to try and understand how we're positioning ourselves in light of this global scene. And maybe perhaps I'll start with you, Mr. Vanda. Or maybe perhaps before you come in, I'm going to ask Mr. Chilembo, because you're with the Chamber of Mines. I would like to understand government strategy on this particular issue. My apologies, Mr. Banda, I will come back to you.
Right, thanks a lot. So the current government strategy is all premised on incubating growth in the sector. We are a mining country that has meandered around the 250,000 ton mark since the 1970s. And what they are trying to do is to get us out of this doldrum by, basically looking at making Zambia more competitive. How this has been done is basically the first things first. We actually have a plan now, and we did not before. This is just the honest to God truth. So they've.
Sorry, you're saying we have a plan now?
Yes, and we didn't before.
Okay.
It's just.
We were just existing.
Yes, basically. What had happened is that we basically got caught up in minutiae of, transient situations in the profitability cycle of the industry. So when you have a super cycle boom, everybody's suddenly beginning to look and feel that the businesses are making too much money, and then you get very militant policies being brought to the fore. And while these policies take 18 months to promulgate, the cycle goes into a downturn, and then, you now have to turn the ship around, which takes another 18 months. And now you have horrible policies and horrible prices and no investors. So this would happen to us very frequently. And what the government has done is, first of all, they've come up with a critical minerals strategy, which takes a very long-term outlook. Mining is a multi-decade industry, so you need multi-decade stable policy. And what they have done, they have basically committed as well as to stabilizing the regulatory environment, which was being driven by these, let's call them distractions. And where we are now is that the government is very intent on keeping regulatory stability and at the same time affording a more competitive average effective tax rate scenario, which will make us competitive enough to steadily attract exploration capital so that we can go out there and find the minerals that are out there that we know are out there, but we cannot quantify. And then we will also be attracting in mine development capital, which will drive up the actual production. So the exploration will drive up our reserves. And when we build a reserve profile that's big enough, the investment capital will follow. So the strategy here is all around being competitive, and globally so. Okay. Yeah.
And I keep hearing about I know the president did declare the 3 million ton goal by 2030, a very ambitious one if we're being honest. Obviously, I don't want to play I want to play devil's advocate. I want to understand the realities of it. Do we have the relevant infrastructure to actually be able to achieve this? I think everybody knows that we do have an energy deficit, and copper is energy intensive. So how are we going to achieve this goal? And maybe Mr. Banda, as the chairperson of ARB, please help us break this down.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, colleagues, for joining this panel. The target, to agree first with Sokwani that there is a plan which is cohesive and very, very clear. And it has a target of 3 million metric tons in the next 5-6 years. That obviously brings into question the issue of infrastructure, as you say. One big issue, obviously, is energy. The current generating capacity in Zambia is about 3,700 megawatts, and there is a target to reach 10,000 megawatts by 2030, 2031, somewhere there. And the idea is that of this, to speak of the current situation, of this 3,700 megawatts or so we have, 80% of it is hydro. And if you have what we're experiencing now, a drought, the impact is felt immediately and in a very harsh way, as we have seen in the last 2 years. So the idea is to get to a proper energy mix. There are some statistics which are there, which shows that there's a target to reach 10,000 megawatts by 2030, when this projected 3 million metric tons will be reached. Okay. And there's plenty of projects which have reached financial closure, and so there's this confidence which we have that we should be able to reach this 10,000 megawatts by then. And still on infrastructure, there are some projects which are underway. One of them is to do with the movement of this product, the Lobito rail line. So this is a rail line which will run from the Copperbelt area in Chingola all the way to Lobito in Angola. It's a project which our firm has been privileged to work on, and we're still currently working on with Africa Financing Corporation. And so this project is one of those which shows that Zambia has a plan to reach this target and ensure that there are no difficulties when we reach this target. And that takes you westwards. Eastwards, we've got the upgrade of another rail line, an existing rail line, that's the Tazara rail line. So these three examples I've given, of movement in infrastructure, is what makes it very clear that reaching this target is something which is the government is taking very seriously, and there are plans to move towards that.
Great. Did we have any additional comments on the subject before I move on?
Well, yes. To add on to what Mr. Banda said, so on infrastructure-wise and on the energy side as well, you will note that over the last 2 years, there's also been some significant, like he said, projects that are coming online. One that comes to mind is phase 2 of Mamba, which you add an extra 300 megawatts of power onto the grid. Aside from that, the 3 million ton target is based off production. Infrastructure is one of them. The other one is, as Mr. Chilembo mentioned, would be exploration. That is the starting point of all mining projects. Now, you would have heard that the Zambian government has, over the last year, embarked on a countrywide exploration, which has been zoned, first of all, to map the entire country and to see what minerals are there. What that does for our colleagues in the banking sector is that then you have a bankable project, because I'll be telling you, I need $10 million to sink 8 drill holes to try and get the copper out of there. So it's those initiatives, deliberate initiatives that are being made that shows that while the target has been given and looks realistic, there's been a move to ensure that we actually try and achieve it. I mean, you can try and fail, but if you don't try at all, you'll never know. That's true.
That's true. Okay, so let me touch on something, value addition. I know that Zambia still exports a lot of ore and basically not a lot of finished copper products. Is there any reason, are there any legal or policy barriers that are preventing us from climbing this value chain? And this question, it's directed at anyone that, any one of you.
Yeah, this was something that lay outside the remit of the mining industry until a few years ago, when there was a very self-serving realization, which was that a lot of the businesses that are building electric vehicles, their batteries, their input materials, also co-finance the construction of mines. So that really opened the industry's eyes to the fact that you want these guys around and you want them as close as possible. So we began to look at what the downstream, what would catalyze downstream investment and bring it closer to us here. So the first thing is you need to make your core mining business as attractive as possible. And when you add all these adjuncts, all these infrastructure issues, policy stability, and what I think we really need to talk about is, goal congruence with industry, which is what we have now. And that's what's really making all of this possible. Then the core mining industry becomes the attractor to the value addition, because you will be getting it, at a good cost. You will be assured of supply. And after that, you really need to go through the same iteration of making the downstream sectors globally competitive that you will have done in the core mining industry. So that's a road we've already begun. As you've heard the chairman of ERB say, there are many moving parts. The energy is one, the transport is another, the legislation and competitiveness of mining is a third. But the good thing is that there's a diversification of where the capital is coming from, which is what is actually introducing even the opportunity to go downstream. Because previously, if you look at all the EV and associated gigafactories in the world, they're all in the northern hemisphere. There isn't a single one in the south. Why? You know, simply because the market is there and closer. So that's why countries like Morocco have already begun to manufacture EVs. But for us in the south here, what we need to do is really package this as a commercial opportunity for those businesses that are investing in the north. What you say is, come here, mine, but while you mine, there are nascent markets here for these things as well. We will also need EVs. The South Africans will pivot. There will be a market there. We need these things for our inverters in all of our homes when we have our load shedding, wherever we are on the continent. We need these things for grid stabilizations because our sources of generating capacity are so far away. So local demand is an opportunity to move into value addition and to then attract the people that are in this business in the north to come here, add some value while they get out their raw materials and leave us with a benefit. Like I like to say, you know, get them to come to the casino, and as long as they play, the house wins. So that's the principle you need to apply when you run an extractive economy.
You're going to need to just clarify on that. The example you just gave?
That the house always wins.
The house always wins.
Well, yes.
For us non-gamblers.
Yeah, so you see, a lot of the times, because mining has so many moving parts, it's quite difficult to explain most of the elements. And the easiest way is to do a casino analogy. Okay. So what you want is you want your investors to come in and play roulette. And remember, the business is premised on how many people walk in the door. So roulette is exploration. A 1 in 300 chance of success. If you're in Zambia, after aerial survey, 1 in 150. Okay. Well, don't quote me on that, but you get the general idea. Then if you win on your roulette, you may move to poker. Poker is your petrochemical industry because there reserves, etc., are very close to cash. So you can see the chips and the game is played differently. But in hard rock mining, it's like the slots. You put in a bit, you get out a bit. You put in a bit, you get out a bit. So you always have to manage your affairs as a casino in such a way that people want to keep coming. You incentivize people with chips. You attract whales with hotel rooms, with visits to game parks in Livingstone, and yeah, and the like. But really, that is how it needs to be contextualized. And if you allow emotions to cloud your thinking, the next thing, the casinos on the slots playing against you. And that doesn't bode well in terms of market optics. So that's really what is trying to be set in place, to be competitive and be top of mind for the world's mining investment community.
I think put in English.
Put it in English.
The policies should be stable. Yeah. When the mining companies arrive, taxation should be clear. There shouldn't be the urge to start changing taxation policies when we feel they are now making super profits.
Okay. That's understood. So now maybe just then to move on to something a little more familiar, and I think you've already sort of pointed to it, which is creating that enabling environment. Mr. Mbalashi, you were in ZCCM. Maybe perhaps by way of specific examples, can you give some of those environmental or mining or regulatory requirements that create this enabling environment? Do we have, well, we're saying we do have an investor-friendly, but let's give me the actual specifics.
Yes, so I think to continue from where Mr. Banda has left off, regulations must be stable. I think that's one of the key factors that any investor would like. mining is capital intensive and it takes a lot of time. So I need to know that if I'm deploying my finances today, the taxes that I pay or the tax regime that I'm faced with today is something that I'll have 10 years when I now begin to make my money. Is Zambia a destination? Are we investor friendly? Yes, certainly. And I'll give you examples with some figures. For the last 3-4 years, we've had an investment of $1.2 billion in Mopani from the Middle East. We have another $1 billion proposed by Vedanta. We have $300 million, $150 million on the Cobalt project, which is an exploration one, which is probably the next mine that will come online. We also have the same $400 million phase 2 Mamba, though interestingly all these funds was raised locally. Now, why would someone put in money, that type of money, into an economy that is not stable? Why am I going to risk my capital to take money into a country that I know I won't get back or there's no stability? I mean, numbers don't lie. I need not give any other examples, but to show that there's been these investments over a short period of time that gives me the confidence to say that, yes, Zambia is open for business and is an investor-friendly destination.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah,
Mr. Banda.
Yeah. If you've, for those of you in Zambia, if you followed the Minister of Finance's speech, the budget speech last week, he talked about incentives being given to the projects which I've talked about here, the Tazara one. The SPV will be given some tax exemptions, some tax benefits. Now, the significant thing about that is that previously, the taxation used to be general. You know, if they say, you know, we're going to offer tax incentives, it won't be to a specific company or entity. It's generally for the whole sector. If it's mining, it's mining. If it's energy, it's energy. But for this particular one, there's some incentives being given specific to a specific company. And this is something which as lawyers we need to be interested in, that maybe this is a very good signal that if you are representing an investor coming, you could see the Ministry of Finance to negotiate specific taxes for yourself. This was not being done recently until now, until this budget speech. And still to talk about the issues of incentives. I talked about incentives in the generation of power. One other one which was talked about in this year's budget speech to be implemented next year is on transmission lines. When you generate power, you obviously need to move it, isn't it? From the generating station to the users. So there are already tax benefits, tax reliefs for generation, but now these are being extended to transmission as well as distribution. So when you're talking about transmission, you're basically talking about the big power lines which you see, going from a power plant to the users, and then to substations, and then downwards from using distribution lines to the users. So incentives are being given around that. Another interesting thing still talking about power to support the mining industry and incentives generally. We have new legislation in this country dealing with open access to electricity. So if you set up a power plant, let's say a solar plant, obviously when you generate that power, you need to move it, isn't it, as I was saying, from using transmission lines. What open access does is that it allows you to use existing infrastructure belonging to somebody else. So you only pay a transport fee, called a wheeling fee. And that encourages investment in generation. So you can come set up your plant, you don't have to think of how to move it because you can use existing infrastructure. So these are some of the policies which, you know, should be of interest to us as lawyers and bring this to the attention of our clients that indeed Zambia is open for business and it's serious about this 3 million metric tons target.
Great. Okay. So the 3 million tons is looking feasible at this stage, at least in my eyes. Mr. Mbalashi, I don't know if you would like to also highlight the ESG. I mean, we did have a whole discussion before about ESG frameworks. I mean, surely this is something that arises even in the mining industry.
Yes, and I was happy to attend the session earlier on ESG.
Your thoughts?
Look, it's a topic that keeps evolving day by day. And I think one of the members of the audience did speak about ESG. And in the context of mining, I think I can speak to all three aspects of it. On the environmental side, unfortunately, of late, we've had some environmental problems or challenges in Zambia relating to spillages and whatnot. That shows you that probably we should now get more aggressive with the policies and the standards that we do with regards ESG. On the social side, someone was talking about a social license, and I think it's Deborah was speaking to chiefs and whatnot. Taking from personal examples, the scene has changed now. In the past, when these mines were being developed, the chiefs were probably more traditional, probably more in their communities. Now, the chiefs or chieftainesses are you and me, people who've gone to school, who are now educated. And so when you go to the table to negotiate for the social license, you find yourself with a business man as opposed to a traditional leader. And I think what people haven't understood, and ourselves as council, is that we need to move with the trends. We need to also understand that even as we are evolving technologically in the mining space, we are also evolving as human beings. And so a social license is very important. It's actually even in our legislation. You cannot obtain or exploit your mining license without consent from the host chief. You cannot. So you can get your license and whatnot, but you will not unless you get their consent. And that shows that there's a recognition, and I think it's a colleague from the M-Phase, Lusaka facility zone, who said that there is legislation that speaks to ESG. Governance, I would like to speak about it broadly in relation to legislation as well. Last year, which was then put into operation this year, the Mines and Minerals Development Act has now been repealed by the Minerals Commission Act, which sort of does two things, or three. One, it tries to streamline the bureaucracy in obtaining licenses. Number two, it also tries to kind of protect local participation. So artisanal miners are only going to be Zambian people, and small-scale mining is citizen-influenced companies. The big players should only play in the large-scale mining space. So I think the framework needs to be there, but I don't think, personally, I haven't seen one yet, that kind of states what ought to be done. Maybe that's a discussion we should start having.
Great. Mr. Banda, I saw you lift your hand. Did you want to add?
On ESG, yes. When it was a very good session we had, I must say, the first session on ESG, and very informative. And the things which we need to do, which we need to be cautious about, were discussed. Deborah, thank you for that. And related to that is the issue of financing. You know, if there's reluctance by financiers to give you money for your projects if you are not ESG compliant. And if I can give an example, why we need to be cautious on this is the issue of energy, again, coal, which is in abundance in some countries in Africa. What do we do with this resource? Okay, we have a project which Lombe has talked about in the southern part of this country. There's already a coal plant, which is generating 300 megawatts of power. Phase 2 of that is another 300 megawatts. There was unwillingness by financiers to pay for that.
So just to clarify, coal is not considered clean energy source?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the technology which is there now is such that you can actually, produce power using coal in a very, very clean way. The striking thing about this plant, which I'm talking about, when I first went there a year ago, is that when you enter the yard is full of roses. It's a rose garden everywhere. Just to make a point, that this is clean technology. And these guys who work there, the executives and middle management, they all wear white shirts. Okay.
Perception is everything.
Yes. And there is no smoke, which you see going up the chimneys as you would think coal plants would produce. Nothing. So the 300 megawatts, the new phase 2, which is being done, there was some talk around it and trying to find money to reach closure for these things. But money was found using pension funds. So we need to think differently when there is some roadblock somewhere, which we feel, we're not saying the environment should not be taken care of. It should be taken care of. But to what extent, considering what the young lady said, Chamwaza, that we're not responsible for these holes in the sky. These were created by other people, so to what extent should we be involved? Yes, we are very careful that we need to be, we acknowledge that we must take care of the environment. But let's be cautious and be aware of these things and think differently on sources of funding, as I said, like using our pension funds. I am supportive of protecting the environment, but in a proper approach. We have to remember also, if I may add, that the policy seems to be inconsistent elsewhere. If there is deficits in other countries, they have no difficulties in going to coal. So, as we have this discussion around ESG and how we implement it, let's have these things, all these issues into account, resources readily available, and there's deficit, as we're experiencing in this country.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose it's just maybe the misconception that when if you're talking about coal, people are considering the industrialization period back in the 18th century. But as you've indicated, there's now technology that can provide for better systems. Okay. So, Mr. Chilembo, I know you mentioned the House always wins and all of that. And you have also actually highlighted, Mr. Mbalashi, that it's actually in our laws that you must have a social license to operate. And I'm really, really happy to hear that. And this is because, when I was looking at the statistics in terms of, for instance, what the mining sector in our country contributes to employment, it's literally 2.4% of the working population, which was a sorry sight to hear. Right? So my question is, I want to understand how we actually ensure that the livelihood of, you've talked about artisanal mining and all of that, but any other examples of how we actually ensure that the rapid expansion of copper mining genuinely translates into better livelihood of our citizens?
Yes.
Because people will always cry foul.
Yes, that's a difficult question. But look, yes, they have been. I can draw on examples. I did mention that now, when you go and obtain your social license, I would like to call it, you would be then facing chiefs that have been to school, chiefs that are now modern. There's been a new trend that has come in where chiefdoms are creating what are called community development trusts. And so there's been a push that any entity that is coming into mine they have a stake. So I can give an example of Kasenseli mine in Northwestern Province, where the chiefdom, I think, has a 5% stake in the mining activities. And so they also want to encourage employment of people from within the community so as to enhance their livelihood, as you are saying. But they also should see the benefit of the copper, the gold that's going out of the community, because at the end of the day, when dividends are paid, when there's social, corporate social responsibility projects that are happening, they stay within the host community. So there is deliberate policies from the government perspective, that is mining, and also a drive in recognition of the social license owners, that they also should play a part in diversification, in modernization, in developing their communities.
Great. Mr. Chilembo, did you want to add?
The issue of attaining social license is very, very broad. It covers a whole spectrum of things, even from how you interact culturally with your host communities, what you will do, and you have to now define this at the beginning of your mining project, what you will do with the mine site after you finish mining. What will the alternative livelihoods of the communities be? So mines are looking very different than they used to, as you've heard from Mr. Banda just now. If you go to Zwaneng in Botswana, or if you go to the first quantum mines in the northwest, in Botswana, you'll be passing a family of warthogs as you walk into the boardroom. If you go to the northwest and you see a snake, you cannot kill it. Those are the company rules. When you see a snake, you give it away, you call the people who will come and get it, and they will move it and keep it somewhere else. So mining looks very different today in order to conform with those ESG requirements. And it is through that broad framework that you get your social license. Things look very different than one would expect. And this is what will de-risk your project. And if you de-risk mining, now we're speaking to a broader social license. If you de-risk mining in Zambia, you are actually de-risking the entire economy. The perception is dominated by the perception of risk in mining. So if that drops, everyone's cost of capital drops, and all ships are lifted. So the 2.4% is very deceptive, because there's a lot that comes in around it in the value chain. I think you probably look at about 4 times that number in jobs. And in terms of disposable incomes as well, mining is an overweight contributor. Yeah.
Okay, great. I actually have heard about that whole you can't kill a snake, you know? The last time I think we found a Gabon viper, and it's right there, and they tell you it's an endangered species. You need to call the authority. I'm like, what's the response time? That is crazy. But no, you cannot kill a snake in Zambia. Crazy. Okay, so I think we're going to leave some time for questions from the audience. But before we do that, it's important that we address the actual question, which is, what is the role of General Counsel and Government Counsel, given everything that we've just outlined here? So I'll give each one 2 minutes to sort of just summarize what they believe the role of Counsel is.
I could start. I think the way to look at it, maybe let me address Mwansa first. She said, Mwansa works for the biggest meat company in this country, Zambeef Products. And she said, external lawyers need to help in-house counsel. So I've taken that as an instruction. You have my brief next week on ESG. I think the way to look at it, whether you're in-house or external, one way I look at things is to work backwards. Look at worst-case scenarios. We always come in the limelight when there is a problem and there's a dispute. So start from there. What are the possible disputes? And then work backwards. In mining, usually it's the example which we're talking about here. The issue of an imbalance which might arise because there's a seeming excessive profit which the mining companies are making. And then citizens start talking, and then the politicians get involved, and then there's a problem. and things have to be revised. So starting from there, you might be tempted to say, to push for an imbalanced, agreement. But it is always good, to advise your clients that they have to look at the national interest as well. And in coming up with the final agreement, those things have to balance profitability for your client and the national interest, because this is what leads to disputes. And you have to therefore avoid these disputes right from the beginning by thinking of national interest as you take care of your client's profit requirements. Then there's the issue of corruption, if I might address that, corruption and bribery. This conception that to get anything done in Africa, you have to pay somebody to do his job. It is us as gatekeepers to stop this. If we reinforce this by actually, providing for this in budgets under miscellaneous, this will perpetuate the situation. Now, why is this a problem? This is a problem because when there is a dispute, the government, again, will come and raise this against you, against your client, that there was corruption in the acquisition of these agreements. And you know what that does. There's a possibility that you can walk away with zero compensation if it is found that that's what happened. So it's a very important thing that we all bear in mind as we are advising our clients in our respective jurisdictions to set up investments. I thought I should highlight those 2 points.
It's crazy that with corruption, the person you're dealing with is the actual government agent. They're happy to take that bribe, but it's the same government that will use it as either a sword or shield when you go to court to nullify your investment. That's crazy. So either way, you as the client and the investor are the only person losing out in the corruption or bribery. I agree. I believe anti-bribery policies are really important. Any addition?
Well, I think you've just demonstrated that the House always wins. So, General Counsel has to really make it very clear, that their job is to ensure, if they're on the government side, that the House wins, and if they're on the corporate side, that the corporate side has, as Mr. Banda pointed out, the long view. Because if you don't keep your eye on the long view, this is where, you can blow up a graveyard and find yourself out of a job, as happened recently to the world's largest mining company, CEO. Yeah.
For me, I think coming from in-house counsel, speaking to my colleagues, both in-house and external, I think what I've noticed is I spoke about evolution. We are no longer black and white letter lawyers. You're now strategists. Yes, you go beyond just cap what and cap what. You need to understand your business, you need to understand the technical aspects of the business for you to properly contribute to them. So you're not just a lawyer. And for mining in particular, it deals with a lot of cross-border relations. You need to understand the complexities of cross-border deals. You need to understand the aspects of sanctions like you're talking about. There is also geopolitical risk as well, depending on where you are drawing your funds. Then the ESG drivers, like Mr. Banda had mentioned, they also come critically in for you to obtain financing. So if you just box yourself and say, I'm a lawyer, you will not add any value to your client or to your employer if you are in-house. Then also due diligence now plays a very, very big role because of the corruption that we are speaking about now, and community rights. We need to know the culture, like you spoke about in the host communities. What is the culture that is there? And also compliance with environmental policies. All in all, I think council are now center of strategy and provision of risk alerts and risk management for your entities. So let's think outside the box, and we are no longer just the white letter. You are an engineer, you are a business person, you are an environmentalist. So that's the advice I'll give.
Great. So we have 10 minutes. We'll start with a set of 3 questions from the audience. Okay. Right, okay. Shaloma. And please, let's keep our questions brief and comments.
Good morning to the panel.
Okay.
I think my question was, or relates to when you started the discussion, there are items that are identified as issues that needs to be addressed. And I take for granted that is specifically with the focus to Zambia. I wanted to know, okay, so I'm from South Africa, by the way, and I work for a DFI. So when I look at opportunities, I also look at the complete ecosystem of value chain, and most importantly, beneficiation. So one of the panelists mentioned the fact that the funders sometimes don't want to provide funding, which then you end up resorting to other means of funding, like your pension fund deposits. So as a funder, you look at, if I find you today and you generate income, what does it mean to the other stakeholders? So it's more on the inclusivity and shared value perspective. So it takes into account the communities and miners being seen as the ambassadors of economy and economic and environmental sustainability. I see that biogas as one of energy alternative is not on the list. I saw biomass. So I wanted to know why. Because we know that we in all economies, we've got those people that they define as middle class. The first panelist spoke about the chiefs now being business people. So people, they change the way that they consume and also the waste that is generated from there. How do we make sure that the waste fields are cleared or not backlogged and use that waste as part of energy generation? And then secondly, how do we as Africans, whether it's Africa Trade or otherwise, are making sure that we create our own equalizer, maybe based on tariffs, to make sure that our copper is a critical commodity, even if it's exported around Africa. And if, or exported, for example, to the US, we also have defensive policies in terms of tariffs, that we make sure that we force that the beneficiation as well as the conversion of the mineral into finished product is done within our geography. Because that will also ensure that there's, what do you call it, a reverse benefit in terms of a reservoir for funds, rather than depending on third-party funding, because that also becomes very expensive in the long run. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Banda, if you can quickly address the issue of biomass. We'll put the slide.
Yeah, no, it's an issue of waste, isn't it? Creating energy from waste. I went to a plant in Johannesburg, and the first thing they told us was, well, the problem we have is that we don't have enough waste. And you know, so it becomes very expensive to generate. So I think it's a good point you raise. It's about ensuring that the technology to be used, you know, is not something where you again be spending more money in generating the power. But I take your point. We don't have in Zambia currently, and I think the reason for that visit was to see what we can do here. It's in the cards. I didn't include here for that reason that we don't have here yet.
Okay. And then the next question with regards to exports and value addition.
Yeah, value addition. Just an additional comment on the gas. You know, we are already very secular societies traditionally. And a lot of the times what people will consider waste that would go into energy is actually used for traditional composting and the like. So that's why the biomass loop doesn't work very well in our basic agrarian economies. Now, coming to tariffs, you know, we must not take a short-term view, because, as I mentioned, this is a long-term opportunity underpinned by technological change. So yes, politics trumps business, but over time, technology will trump the politics. So if you will have tariffs that will discourage the movement of copper to a particular part of the world, another part will just come and buy it up. So you have to always maintain the business lens and maintain a level playing field, and you know, the correction will come from the market because the demand is that substantial. So really, as regards retaining value, you cannot use the word force. It's a business opportunity. I'll give you an example of something that happened. We had the Kerietsu, all the big Japanese companies come here one day. And as soon as the presentation went into, oh, we would like to make batteries here so that we can take some of your market share where you come from, everyone just glazed over and switched off for that portion of the presentation because it does not make commercial sense. You have to package it in a way where there is a mutual benefit. You come here, you get your ore, and while you are here, there are also new market opportunities that are additive to what you're already involved in now. If you keep that picture in mind, all this tariffing and what have you is going to come right simply because there are mistakes, and mistakes create red ink, and red ink makes pain, and people get fired, and things are corrected. So you keep the business focus and you'll be fine in the long term.
Thank you. So unfortunately, we only have time for one more question, but we will continue the conversation after this. And yes, we'll definitely continue the conversation after this. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Nakasamba. Sholomo is my name, Law Association of Zambia, Council member. I'm from Zambia here. Good morning, Mr. Banda, Mr. Chilembo, and Mr. Mbalashi. So I have a question, and it comes from a place where someone who grew up on the copper belt, the mining town, I'm a bit passionate about mining, and something has always bothered me. Mining in Zambia, I believe, the first copper deposits were discovered somewhere in 1902, 1903 on the copper belt, and the first mine was in 1928, the Ron Anthrop in Luansha. And then I think 1931, thereabout, the mines followed in Nkana, Nchanga, and Mofurea. So that's over 100 years of mining. And we've had 6 years of independence. Of course, the pre-independence was under the British South African Company. But after independence, we have been mining for 61 years. And we've had 61 years of peace as a country. So undisturbed mining activities. And today, I'll drive my question from the subject, why the world wants Zambia's copper. And you mentioned that we are driving to get to 3 million tons of copper, and it's a new oil. But my question is, what has mining of our copper really done for our country? We've been mining it for over 100 years, and for 61 years at Zambia. But has this mining really translated into meaningful and significant development? And I ask this as somebody who comes from the copper belt. I've also lived in Solwezi, by the way,
Thanks.
which also has one of the two biggest mines in Africa currently.
So, Sholomo, not to cut you short.
Yes.
Because of the
Okay,
time
so
constraint.
if you can allow me to complete.
Okay.
And I'm getting there. We're saying we'll get to 3 million tons. What would that do for us? Okay. What has mining of this copper done to us? And because if you went to the copper belt today, or to Solwezi where there are those two big mines, it doesn't even look like Lusaka. It's difficult for somebody to understand that this is where we have been mining for 100 years, and we're still considered a poor country. So have we failed ourselves? Because today you are talking about the Mines Commissions Act. We have been repealing, replacing mining legislation. Don't we know what works? And I asked Lombe because you've also worked in the mines industry for a long time, and I also drive this question to Mr. Chilembo. Don't we know what we need? Don't we know the legislation that can be effective and can help us derive the ultimate benefits from the mining of our copper? Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the...
And maybe before you answer, and you say, what has mining done for us? Just to complete that question, as alternative to just letting the copper deposit stay, to give the contrary contribution. Because you're saying we've been mining for 60 years, and what has mining done for us? And your contrary suggestion is? Okay, but it's not stop mining. Great, okay. You can answer.
So, two things. What has it done? Number one, for yourself, I would like to believe and assume you're educated by the very minds you're talking about. No, I said I would like to assume. Now, infrastructure, most of the infrastructure in this country, especially on the copper belt, was built from the very mining you're talking about. Education, health, and sport. Think of it. The problem, and I'll put it personally, it's you and me, the lawyers. You and me, the regulators. We went into all these agreements, but who was following compliance? Who was ensuring that the things that they committed to do was actually being done? So that's an indictment on you. What can we do better? Create the right contracts, create the right agreements, and ensure enforcement of those agreements.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I know we have plenty of questions, and I really apologize. The time constraints unfortunately had to navigate here, and I'm not even able to summarize what we've discussed here. All I will say is I am hopeful that this geo-brief has provided you a summary of the mining landscape in Zambia. We have brought out the challenges, but I think what we've learned is challenges are not necessarily deterrents to moving forward. The issue is we figure out how we navigate these challenges and perhaps find the relevant opportunities. So I'm hopeful that we have picked out, as whether we are financiers or whatever industry we are in, we have picked out what the opportunities are in this particular industry, because Zambia is open for business. Thank you very much. You have been amazing.
That was deserving of louder than that. Come on, one better. I thought this panel tied into the previous panel very well. Ernst is probably smiling somewhere. It was very, very enlightening and thought-provoking, and I think we're all going away from this session with a lot of food for thought about particularly the extractive industry, ESG, and how we as lawyers can help drive policy to make our countries a better place for, the people we leave behind. So legacy. Now I'm pleased to announce to you that you can get up and take a cup of coffee.